Hello, this is Scotty Reed with a Black Talk Radio News Report. I got a Google alert this morning on, I have alerts out for terrorism, white supremacy, trying to track any instances of racism and hate crimes being committed by white supremacist terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, Aryan Nation, and others. And so I got this link to this article on fierce homeland security, and it's talking about Congressional Research Service finds renewed focus on domestic terrorism, and this is on fiercehomelandsecurity.com. Now, the article talks about domestic terrorism becoming a top priority at the Justice Department, and this is according to a brief from the Congressional Research Service. Now, it talks about the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 and how this Domestic Terrorism Executive Committee met earlier this summer, and that it originated under Attorney General Janet Reno. Now, they're also saying that the reestablishment of this committee is saying that officials, and when they say officials, I guess they mean police departments, police unions, and those politicians who are in their pockets. And so it talks about the reestablishment of this committee is because officials are raising the profile of domestic terrorism as an issue with the Department of Justice after more than a decade of heightened focus on both foreign terrorist organizations and homegrown individuals inspired by violent jihadist groups. And this is according again to this brief. Now, it goes on and, it talks about the so-called Sovereign Citizens movement, says that it has police worried, says that those who adhere to that political view reject the authority of government, especially at the federal and state level, and in a few cases they have violently attacked or killed police officers. Now, there are not a lot of police officers being killed, and I addressed an article not that long ago where they were putting out police have such a dangerous job, and they, instead of giving the figures on how many police have been killed, they use percentages, like saying something like there was a 50% increase. Well, look, if you got one cop being killed and then the next year, there's two cops killed, well, that's a 50% increase. Now, if you're just dealing with percentages, that's going to make wow, that's a huge jump. A lot of cops are being killed, when that's not the case at all. What it is nothing but propaganda. If police had such a dangerous job, then more of them would be getting killed instead of the thousands of citizens that they are killing. Now, I wanted to do a report on this because if we look at Ferguson, what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri right now, I think that we as a people, and I'm not talking about any specific ethnic group, but I think people have to start looking at the police themselves as terrorists. Now, this article also talks about the challenges that the Department of Justice faces because, free speech right, First Amendment rights of people to speak whatever they want. And indeed, and not just people but American citizens. And indeed, there was a federal court case that found that this person who was commenting on in the comment section articles who were saying, calling for President Obama to be killed and all this and that, and they said that was his free speech right. All right, so so that is what they are alluding to, saying it's difficult. But then you look at Ferguson again, and you look at the trampling of the free speech right of protesters who were simply protesting and demanding justice in the murder of Michael Brown by police terrorist Darren Wilson. So, it just seems odd that they will be talking about free speech rights, but I don't see that kind of strong language coming from the federal government. And indeed, they are allowing the trampling of the First Amendment rights of the people of Ferguson and any other person that wants to go there and stand in solidarity with them. They're also, in terms of the federal government, let's not forget the federal government is the one that implemented the no-fly zone over the airspace over Ferguson. I mean, just think about how that sounds. You know, when I think of restricting the airspace, I'm thinking about when President Clinton, you know, maintained airspace restriction on Saddam Hussein in the southern part of Iraq, allegedly to protect the Kurds or protect, you know, Sunnis or Shias, I should say. And so now we're having airspace restricted over Ferguson. Now that also violates freedom of the press. It prevents the press from giving us a bird's eye view of what's happening on the ground. And so, you know, we have to stop thinking, letting the media lead us into thinking, you know, these are terrorist groups, these militias that are going through the woods and arming themselves and having these military exercises, and then, you know, sovereign citizens and stuff like that. How many of these militias or sovereign citizens are gunning down citizens in the streets of America? Did a sovereign citizen or a militia group go in there into Ferguson and gun down Michael Brown and then trampled on the free speech rights of the citizens who were rightly outraged at that heinous crime? No. And it is the police. I think it would be wise if the American public starts viewing police as terrorists. And, you know, I've stated this before, just like the American government funds different terrorist groups around the world through the CIA, funds them, arms them, and all of that so that they can accomplish their geopolitical goals on behalf of corporations. You know, who's arming these police terrorists with weapons of mass destruction, weapons of warfare to be used against the American people? You know, I don't see any sovereign citizens or militias breaking into people's houses trying to find drugs so that they can enslave them on a prison plantation. You know, I don't see any sovereign citizens or militias tackling people in the street as they engage in a nonviolent drug transaction. You know, that is what Darren Wilson got his commendation for, as he's seen in that video, which was posted by one of his many fathers. You know, the guy got so many fathers. Wow, he has a lot of personal issues. But yeah, he was given a commendation for apprehending a person engaged in buying some drugs. So they're giving out commendations for that. So again, I don't see any sovereign citizens or militias enslaving the close to 2.5 million people that are in a detention facility, in a jail, or in a prison. Vast majority of them in there for nonviolent drug crimes, either using drugs or selling drugs or being in possession of drugs. And, you know, Ron Paul did an article just yesterday. It was published, and he talked about, you know, the Department of Defense's in one of their, I guess, statements or reports that they produced for Congress, they cited the drug war as a reason for giving all these cops, you know, these armored vehicles, mine-resistant vehicles, like people are planting mines in the streets of America, you know, giving them all of these assault weapons and stun grenades and all. It is ridiculous. And so I think it is clear, you know, to see who the real terrorists in America are. And that is the police, the SWAT units, and it's just time out for that. And then also, you know, I did a report the other day on the Oath Keepers, where you had Dan Page, a St. Louis cop who has been suspended with pay because he was talking to a St. Louis chapter of the Oath Keepers, and he was using very racist language towards black people, and he talked about how much he has killed in the past because he's a Vietnam War criminal. And, you know, how he will kill other people, and if you don't want to be killed, don't get in front of him. Why isn't Oath Keepers being looked at as a terrorist group that has infiltrated the United States government or local and state government? These are terrorists, all right? And then let's not forget, another Ferguson police officer or neighboring county officer that has been participating in terrorizing the people in Ferguson issued a threat on Twitter about Eric Holder, saying he should go into work early so he could punch Eric Holder in the nose for so many reasons. How many stories have we heard about cops being assigned to details to protect the president of the United States or the first family, and then they're heard, making comments about killing them. And so, it is time out for allowing the media to dictate to us who we should perceive as terrorists. If anything, the oppressed people, like the oppressed people of Ferguson, and I'm talking non-white people particularly, who are the number one targets of these terrorists, if they're not gunning you down, then they're, bringing you up on some drug charges so they can put you on a prison plantation and enslave you. So who are the real terrorists? And so, when I look at this website, Fierce Homeland Security, and then I try to find out who the editors are. So I go down here, I click on editors, and it brings up nothing. It doesn't even tell you who the editors are. All right. So then what I went to find out, well, who is this group that owns it? Man, I didn't mean to do that. Give me just a moment. If I look at who owns the group, I pulled it up right down here, QuestX Media Group, LLC. And so I looked up down to the About page, and it's talking about engaging audience to drive demand. What are they trying to drive demand? Investment in 21st century slavery and human trafficking. Investment in the military industrial complex. Investment in the law enforcement industrial complex to spend billions of dollars on arming these police with weapons of mass destruction. So that, again, you had to be careful, and it's not just sites like this, but it's also the mainstream media. I was watching MSNBC the other night, what was Ed Schultz, what is it, the Ed Show, and then he was talking about, why these police need to be militarized and have all of this equipment because of terrorist threats. Look, did any of those mine-resistant vehicles and assault weapons and all of these guys dressed like they're ready for combat in a war zone, where we are in a war zone, actually behind enemy lines in the United States of America? But, did any of that stop the Boston Marathon bombing? No, it did not. Police do not stop crime, all right? They are committing crimes in the country, all right? If they do respond to real crimes like murder, where somebody has been raped, where somebody has been murdered or whatnot, they aren't stopping that. They're just responding to it. And then there's a backlog of rape kits that have not even been tested, And so, you don't have money to process these rape kits and get rapists off the street because you're spending all this money on military hardware and focusing on arresting and enslaving nonviolent drug criminals. And so, yeah, Ed Schultz wants to justify it, under terrorism. Look, these people are the terrorists, and the American people are arming these terrorists to terrorize them. Wow. So it's time out for that. Let's not allow them to create enemies for us. Again, there are no sovereign citizen groups. There are no militias that I see occupying black neighborhoods or Hispanic neighborhoods. I don't see any of them gunning down, non-white people in the street. That's all the police. That's the police. That's who the terrorists are. You know, beating women, old women, and mentally ill people on the side of the road, just shooting people down when they could use tasers and whatnot. It's just time out. It is time for the American people to wake up and demand accountability and demand a change in how our communities are policed. Actually, we don't need the police. Why don't they just act like firemen and just stay in the station until they're called out to respond to a crime in progress, or, you know, after the fact to come and investigate, you know, crimes, whether it's a break-in, whether it's a rape, whether it's a murder, because they are not stopping anything, and that is evident. So, you know, the real terrorists, bottom line, are the police. This is Scotty Reed, Black Talk Radio News.